There's nothing I can do to increase your certainty for the future. However, there are things that you can do to increase your tolerance of uncertainty. Lachlan, this is Dr. Ali Matu. Welcome to the Psych Show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on. You treat a lot of people like with anxiety and all that sort of stuff. And whilst I wouldn't necessarily say I'm someone who suffers from it to like an extreme degree, I was just sort of curious what sort of like advice you'd have to offer to someone who, I'm the sort of person who sort of gets caught up in like fear of the future or anxiety of the future. And I'm just sort of wondering what sort of thoughts you think are best to sort of mediate like those worries.
So that's a great question, and that's a concern that comes up all the time. Anxiety it's the most common mental illness out there. And it's also, if you just step back, if you look at people who might struggle with it, but not to the degree where they might need to seek professional help for it, it's one of the most common emotions that people struggle with. Mm. So you're in good company, my friend. So I got a quick question for you, and then we'll get into this discussion. Do these worries you have about the future or some of the self-sabotaging thoughts you're talking about, do they ever cause you problems? Do they ever get in the way of your life?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because it's worrying to like a degree where it's kind of just like, it can be like, paralyzing to some degree, I'd say, because I'll be so worried about something that it makes it harder to sort of act on it.
Right. So do you have a recent example that you'd be comfortable sharing?
So as of late, uni enrollments and all that sort of stuff occur in like early February. And so I was really like deliberating over what I wanted to do, over whether I wanted to study like psychology or whether I wanted to do audio engineering. And, I sort of like said to myself, I'll do audio engineering. And I deliberated for so long and I couldn't like come to my decision that it led to me, in the end, I was like, I'm not going to do audio. I want to do psych, you know what I mean? And then, but then I missed like enrollments and stuff like that. So now I have to wait and for a longer period of time to elapse to get into it.
Yeah. But my sense is, from what you've described, this is probably a good example of the kind of problem that you have often, where you have to make a decision and you might hold off on making that decision. You're dealing with a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety while you're trying to make that decision, and then maybe not making that decision actually causes more problems. Like in this case, you can't register again until when? You said it's like next year or a few months down?
Till like mid-year. I've been reading a lot of books lately, and I read there's this term metacognition, and it's the act of thinking about thinking. Yes. And I don't think that there's a better term like for me to have come across, because I always am thinking about my own thinking.
It's anxiety, and that's what happens especially with people who really struggle with their worries. So you're kind of thinking about your thoughts. You're kind of getting stuck in that loop. We talked about one thing that happens, which is indecision. Some other things that might happen, and I just want to check in with you about. Do you try to get a lot of reassurance? Like, do you try to look up a lot of information, like, audio engineering versus like psychology? Do you do a lot of that, or talking to a lot of people?
Yeah.
Like, hey, let me throw this by you. What do you think?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm very hands-on. Like I write a lot. Like I jot down my thoughts. I read like a ton. I try and do like a lot of research. Like, I look into like the career prospects on both sides a lot. Like I definitely put a lot of thought into the decision, and I discuss it with people a lot as well.
So getting back to audio engineering versus psychology, and this kind of example you gave me, how often do you struggle in this same way with everyday decisions or everyday worries? So I'm talking about waking up, the kind of stuff I have to do during the day, the tasks on my list during the day, the worries about your health, the health of other people, that kind of stuff, your finances, things like that. How much does this kind of pattern play out with these other everyday kind of situations?
So I wouldn't say it's always like a sort of severe thing. Like it's not always like at the like tip of my mind, you know what I mean? But definitely it feels like most of the time there's always that sort of underlying feeling of like this sort of like slight dread in regards to like, I've got to make sure I've got everything worked out for my future. Like I'm the sort of person I fear the future far more than I like would regret anything in the past. You know what I mean?
What are you afraid of?
I think I'm most afraid of sort of just like not achieving like comfort, sort of like not achieving sort of like a comfortable lifestyle and being like secure. I'm afraid of like a lack of security. And then in turn, sort of like if I am like failing career-wise, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's sort of a thing where I'm like potentially afraid of like, you know, not being able to like maintain like relationships with like friends, like romantic relationships, all that sort of stuff. I just have a fear of sort of losing it all. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you know, it's just the sort of fear of like not being like financially stable, sort of not really making much of myself and sort of just like, you know, lingering around.
I got to tell you, that's a fear that a lot of folks I work with who struggle with worries. That's one of the big common worries is I don't want to fail. I don't want to let myself down. I don't want to let the people near me down. I don't want to be in a really catastrophic type of situation in terms of my life. The kind of fear that you have, it is about these future consequences, these future situations. And the thing about the future is it's as Yoda said, it's always in motion. It's always changing. We don't quite know what's going to happen. So there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. Well, uncertainty is the thing that fuels worries. You know, what happens when you have this type of anxiety is your mind wants to get more certainty. It wants to read more articles. It wants to talk to more people. It wants to spend more time thinking about possible solutions. But there's no way you can think yourself out of this. So what your mind wants to do in these situations is try to minimize uncertainty as much as it can. But the thing with these kind of worries are they're worries about the future, and you are never going to have certainty. I don't know what's going to happen tonight, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow for you. So every day we are dealing with uncertainty, and every day we accept a certain amount of uncertainty. There's something about these situations, though, that make it harder for you to accept more certainty, accept more uncertainty. What do you think it is?
I mean, it really resonates with me what you said about the whole you can't like, you know, think your way out of it, because I've read like countless sort of like books and all those sorts of things. Not necessarily just like self-help ones, but like, you know, all those social psychology and just lots of like literature, anything to sort of help me grasp that sort of like, oh, what can I do to like, you know, really work my way out of it? I think it's so like sort of programmed within me to want like a logical sort of like, you know, progression to understand where I'm headed. I think I've just got sort of like a bit of a fear of not knowing like where I'm headed. And so, you know, I think also the pessimist in me sort of says like, oh, well, you know, if you don't know where you're headed, then it's probably for the worst.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. There's a great term to look up if you haven't come across this in your research already. Defensive pessimists. This is my wife, 100%. So for some people, when you're facing a stressful situation, it can actually be helpful to be optimistic about it, and that actually helps you to prepare, and it helps you to face that situation. For other people, for people who are more defensive pessimists, they need to think about what can go wrong in order to prepare for it. And that is actually what helps them alleviate stress and anxiety. I think you're someone who is wired to experience more anxiety related to the unknown and the future. And that's okay, because in some industries and jobs and roles, that is a very good thing. I want the people working in space programs who are planning the next launch to be highly anxious about all the consequences of what might be happening. I want the people who are doing big scale planning for the future to be more anxious about this kind of stuff, right? So in some situations that's really helpful. Where it seems to be getting in the way for you is when you do need to move forward and you don't, you get blocked, you get stuck because of your own anxiety. Am I summarizing things right so far?
Definitely. I would say so.
Okay. So here's what we got to do. There's nothing I can do to increase your certainty for the future. However, there are things that you can do to increase your tolerance of uncertainty. So I want you to think about it like this. Do you have any allergies?
I've got a brother who's allergic to chicken, anaphylactic to chicken and also peanut.
Okay. So that's a good example here. So if your brother eats chicken, his body thinks that this is some kind of foreign invader, some kind of infection, and it starts fighting it off to the point where he goes into anaphylactic shock, it sounds like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So that's how allergies work. When someone who has an allergy, they eat or get exposed to or touch a everyday thing, whether it's pollen or a type of food or a type of animal, right? And those things are not dangerous to that person, but your body thinks they are, so it starts fighting them off. But that fighting is what causes the problem. It's what causes the allergy. Whether it's your eyes get poofy, your throat starts to close up, you start to sneeze, whatever the allergy response is, your body doesn't need to be doing that. So this healthy mechanism is now causing problems. That's the same thing with your worries, my friend. It is natural for us to get worried when we're facing uncertainty. But for you, when you face uncertainty, it's like your body having an allergic reaction. It's worrying more than it probably needs to. It is seeking more reassurance. It has a drive to gain more knowledge, and it has a drive towards trying to focus all your attention on this thing. And the reason why it's probably happening more for you at night is you have less things kind of consuming your attention, less things absorbing your mind. You're probably more tired too, or maybe you have more reminders of this decision you have to make, that kind of stuff. So when you're experiencing worries to this degree, it's like an allergic reaction to uncertainty. That's what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Does that kind of resonate? That kind of fits?
Definitely.
Okay. So we have to build up your ability to tolerate that uncertainty. We have to build up the ability for you to actually experience whatever it is that's causing you an allergy. And the reason why I like this analogy so much is that's what some of the experimental treatments of allergies actually do. Like for peanut allergies, the experimental trials, they're getting your body slightly exposed to the peanut allergen. And over time, that slight exposure actually helps your body to understand, I don't need to fight this thing. I can deal with this. I can deal with this inside. That's kind of what we have to do for you. We have to find that version of it for you. So what that means is you have to be aware when you're going into above and beyond anxiety mode. So when you're worrying about something more than what most people would, when you're seeking more reassurance than most people would, when you're trying to get more information than most people would, number one, you got to recognize that, okay, I'm going into this place now. So one thing that can help is to think about 10 people in your life. What would they do in this situation? Would they spend a few hours thinking about this? Now, if it's a very big life situation, then yeah, they might. But if it's something you've already spent a ton of hours thinking about, then maybe they won't. So I like to think about 10 people in your life, or if that's too hard, think about 5 people in your life. If that doesn't work, ask 3 people you're close to. Could be a family member, someone you work with, or someone you go to school with, and a friend. And ask them, hey, let me check in with you. I just want to know if I'm being reasonable here or if I'm sort of being unreasonable. What would you do in this situation? Does this sound like something you would do, or does this sound like this might be more my anxiety? So number one, get a check of your anxiety and know if this is common or if this is less common. So that's one place where I would start.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
Okay. So then let's say you get check-in with your friends and they're like, oh yeah, no, I would totally be researching this. This is a big decision. This is totally common. I do the same thing. Then great, keep doing that because that's where you should be. But if you get feedback that this is actually not where most people are, then I want you to find ways of tolerating uncertainty. So that, number one, that probably means stop doing your research. Stop looking up more information. Stop trying to get more data because you're not going to get more data. One of the things that I was just talking to someone else about this, you apply for something or you send an email and then you keep rechecking your email or you keep looking online to see if they've sent out stuff about those applications. You got to stop that because that will just keep you stuck in the loop of anxiety. You're not gonna get anywhere. So that's number two is minimize the data. If you're in anxiety land, then minimize looking up more information. And that also means minimize getting reassurance from other people. Minimize asking them, is it okay? Should I be doing this? Should I not be doing this? You wanna hold off on that. The next thing I want you to do is, what are my values here? What's important to me? What do I care about? And if you're unsure of those things, the quickest way to get a sense of your values, I wish we had more time, we could actually do this, but the quickest way to get a sense of your values is think about your 100th birthday. Like, who's there? What are the stories that they're sharing about you? What is it that you want to be known for? Based on the things you're afraid of, my guess is the things that you want to be known for is really working towards something that made a difference, or having these relationships that you really care about, that you weren't a failure, but you made a positive impact in your community, and that you really cared about the people you're close to. I'm guessing it's something along those lines.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like, what would you say are the important values that you have to you right now? Like, what is it?
Yeah, what's valuable? I do, it's what I think most people would hope for, but I definitely want to excel in whatever field I go into. You know what I mean? I want to do well, and I want to make a difference within it and do something interesting within it.
Yeah, so it's important for you to excel, to work hard, to really make a difference in whatever field you go into, and then to be there for other people, to be able to help them, to be able to do more for them. My friend, the only way to do that is to be able to take risks. If you want to achieve and excel, that also means taking risks. When I started this YouTube channel, it was a big risk for me. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I had a bunch of dud episodes that I spent so much time making and struggling with, and episodes that no one watched, no one cared about those things. You are going to fail. That is going to happen. If you're working hard and you want to make a difference in a field, you're going to have setbacks. Whether it's audio engineering or psychology, you're going to have setbacks. But as long as you learn from those, that's actually how you get better. So this is where sports psychology is really very eye-opening for me. Anyone who trains athletes, professional athletes, they have to help those athletes get very good at setbacks. The times where they don't have a good game or they don't have a good match. You have to be able to learn from those and see what you can improve. You can't improve and get to a point where you are competing at a high level without failing, without dealing with setbacks and all of that sort of stuff. That means you got to take risks. You got to face some uncertainty. So for you, when you're facing these unknowns, I want you to think about these values. I want to make a difference. I want to excel. I want to be the guy who's there for other people. And make a decision based on that. Like, what will help you right now take one step forward towards that goal? What's going to help you right now to make a decision that's consistent with these values that you have? That's what you got to move forward. The values you're talking about means you have to be able to accept more risk. You have to be able to try more. So hopefully you get to a point there where you kind of are leaning towards a decision. And if you're not, get back to your values, help those to help you decide what decision to make. And then I want you to make a commitment to facing that uncertainty for a small period of time. Doesn't mean you're making a decision that's going to impact your whole life. It does mean you're making a decision that impacts the next month, or the next 3 months, or the next 6 months, or the next 12 months. Like, however long a period of time of uncertainty you're willing to take on, I want you to take on a piece of that uncertainty. Like this decision that you have about what path to go down academically, a year from now, could you change that decision?
Yeah. I suppose I could.
So what are we afraid of then? Because if you...
Yeah, exactly.
What I'm asking you to do then is take on uncertainty for the near future. Take some of those courses, see how this is going for you, and then if it's not going well, you can change. You can totally change.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't know what. It's so strange to have it put into these sorts of terms. It makes you just look at it so differently so quickly.
Almost as if that's my job. I do this for a living. The other thing here is once you've made that decision, once you've moving forward with it, you're still going to have some worries. Like, did I make the right decision? Right?
Yeah.
And that's where this connects with sleep. The periods of time that you're really vulnerable to these worries, I want you to have some go-to activities, things that really absorb your mind and make it a little bit easier for you to tolerate that uncertainty. I'll give you an example. For me, when I'm really dealing with a lot of worries and there's just nothing I can do, I've kind of done my due diligence and I'm just kind of waiting for this thing to happen now. It's going to be movies or hanging out with a friend and having conversations about stuff that's not related to this thing I'm stressed about. And then the last thing I'll say about sleep is make sure you're only going to bed when you're actually tired. If you're not tired, it's going to make it really hard for you to fall asleep. So if you go to bed, you're tired, but then you're kind of waking up, get out of bed, do something relaxing, and then get back in bed and try that again. We want bed to be a calming place. How are you feeling about all this?
Quite good. It's always very relieving to have a nice sort of extensive conversation about, all these sorts of issues and try and put it all into perspective.
Here's a cool thing about this is your life, my life, there isn't one path forward. Just because it feels like you're moving one step forward towards one path doesn't mean another path might not emerge or that other path that you're considering is gone forever. All I'm asking you to do is to take on a little bit of uncertainty for a little period of time, and then in the future you can check in and see if this still makes sense for you, and if not, you can switch gears.
Yeah, I definitely like that way of looking at it.
Awesome. Do you struggle with worries? Have you been dealing with difficulty making decisions? I know this is something that happens to me anytime I'm at a restaurant and the menu is full of hundreds of items. I can't decide. I don't know what to get. Do you struggle with this kind of stuff? Let me know in the comments below. Lachlan, thank you for being on this call. It was
not a problem. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.